Welcome to the Barebow Hunter Podcast with your hosts, Nate Bailey and Jerry Goins, where we celebrate the ancient paths of our barebow ancestors, where hard work and woodsmanship outweigh advanced shooting devices, where we value those who've gone before us and welcome those yet to come. Join us as we share valuable insight about the barebow hunter's lifestyle. Hello, welcome to another edition of the Barebow Hunters Podcast. And today is kind of a special day because some of you guys have probably figured out by now that I have been building a muzzleloader, and through this process, I've been trying to do a lot of research, and I ran across a podcast called Muzzle Blast. And Ethan, you're the host of Muzzle Blast, and also you are, I guess you could just go ahead and tell me, Ethan, what you do.
Hi, I'm Ethan, and I'm the National Muzzleloading Rifle Association Marketing Director. So I'm handling all of our social media and podcast and all the fun stuff.
Cool. So I ran across your guys' stuff. Actually, I ran across it on YouTube. You guys have a YouTube channel. You have a podcast. Yeah. And I was, me being a bow hunter and then jumping into muzzleloading, I really wanted to find somebody that an organization that kind of stood there for what's been going on over a long time, and you guys really do, right?
Yeah, we've been around since about 1933 is when we were formally started. So for us, muzzleloading is in our blood.
Yeah. If you go over to your website, to you guys' website, you can really see that. That's the cool thing about all this is there was a ton of history that I was pulling up and I was looking at when I went over there. And me being a traditional bow hunter, I have a lot of history that I look at in the traditional bow hunting world. We have organizations like Compton's and PBS and these other organizations. And so when I was just blown away that I did not know about any of this in the muzzleloading world. I felt like I was behind the eight ball, and it's kind of rekindled some of my pioneering spirit. So
well, that's great. That's what we like to hear. We joke a lot that we're kind of the best kept secret of the traditional or outdoorsman sportsman community. There's a lot of people out there that are interested in muzzleloading because of the simplicity. And we've been around forever, as far as modern kind of camping and outdoorsmanship goes. But not a lot of people know about it.
Right.
That's where I kind of come in. That's what my position is trying to fix now.
Yeah, and you're doing a good job. I mean, the stuff that you guys are putting out is quality, really good stuff.
Thank you.
And that's kind of the reason I wanted to get you on here is to kind of get it out in the traditional outdoorsman's community, because I mean, traditional archery and muzzleloaders kind of go together. There's a lot of bushcraft, there's a lot of skill, there's a lot of these things that, other than the weapon itself, we're a lot alike. I mean, as far as what we value getting close to animals. That's the thing that we really value. We enjoy that about it. We value the simplicity of everything. We value the being able to make it work and those kind of things. Yeah,
there's a lot that goes together with that. Even at our headquarters in Friendship, Indiana, we have a 40-shot 3D archery course set up just for traditional longbows. So all of your stick bows or bone bows, or horn bows,
right,
and that kind of thing. So, it's not as large as our traditional muzzleloading or muzzleloading in general.
Right.
Areas there, but it's still part of what we do, and especially for the guys that are real into traditional muzzleloading, they're still bringing their bows and setting up camp, and they'll spend a day shooting muzzleloaders, and then they'll spend a day shooting archery. So it's a very close handshake between archery and muzzleloading, definitely.
Yeah, and especially the traditional stuff that we do. With okay, now I've just scratched the surface here of muzzleloading, and since I've contacted you and things like that, you've probably seen that. You probably could understand that there's
Yeah.
not a whole lot here. I'm learning quick. It's a steep learning curve. But at the same time, the community has been just amazing. The muzzleloading community has been, so inviting and telling me the things I'm doing wrong. I was pouring straight out of a flask, and they're like, "Don't ever do that."
No.
Yeah, you're gonna end up killing yourself doing that. And they didn't do it in the way I'm used to. Sometimes in the past, in some of the communities that I've been in, there's guys that aren't very articulate on how they help you. Okay,
Right.
that's an easy way of saying that, I hope. And then in the muzzling community, these guys were like, "Hey, man, good stuff, but you need to do this, and this is why." And it wasn't belittling or anything like that. And I found that so far in the muzzling community, which is kind of a breath of fresh air for me.
Absolutely. I think that the community itself is wonderful. There's a lot. I mean, you'll find people like you're talking about that are a little more gruff or don't necessarily have the patience for newcomers. That everybody that's involved with muzzleloading, it's so hands-on and it's so time-intensive and mentally intensive that you have to care about what you're doing. And I think that transfers to when they come across, or we come across, a newcomer getting interested in it. We're hands-on with the thing that we love, and then communicating that, and the safety especially, kind of goes right there with that. It's just a labor of love that we want to share with other people, because none of us are getting any younger. And right now, muzzleloading, for us especially, it really started kind of in the Great Depression and then had a resurgence in the 1970s. So if you started muzzleloading in the 1970s, you're not a young bird anymore. You're not a spring
Right.
chicken. And so everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people are looking at it now and saying, "Hey, we need to do the nice thing and put a hand out for the next generation of muzzleloaders."
Right. And I think your organization is really pushing at that. I see it just in the content that you guys are putting out and what you guys are saying. It's really cool to see that generation reaching out to a younger generation and wanting to pass that stuff on. I've seen it in the traditional bow hunting world too. You got people at Compton's that are just absolutely crazy the way that they help other guys getting into traditional bow hunting. And and so those organizations I always like to talk about, because that is really what we need. I think just sportsmen in general need that, more or less, muzzleloading or traditional bow hunting. That's something that we really need. And that's one of the other things that you guys do is the history. So if you just go and check out your post on Instagram, man, there's just the history of what you put on there. Just there's actually guns that I've looked at and I'm like, wow, what is that? I need to figure out more about this. And I was spelling like Hawkins, Hawkins, which is that's horrible. When I look at it now, when I look back, because that's a guy's name that came up with the rifle,
Yeah.
And there's so much history.
That was one of the first kind of industrial empires of America.
Yeah. And so when I started checking out the history of this stuff, I'm like, wow, you know what? There's a lot of cool stuff here that, really could, this next generation coming up, could really value. There's a lot of good stuff that you guys are putting out there, and history's part of it. I mean, I'm really big into history and traditions. My family came over to Oregon before the Oregon Trail was here, and so
wow,
yeah, they probably even used a Hanken rifle when they lived. They lived where the Oregon Trail came to and where it split to the Barlow Trail, and then they resupplied their wagon trains. That's how they made their money for years. And
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so now when I built a Hawken, and I built, it was a Traditions.
Yeah.
And so when I hold that, I feel like I'm maybe in kinship with my great-great-grandfather.
Absolutely.
So, Yeah, that kind of
That's
stuff.
something it's really neat about muzzleloading because you don't have to go very far back in just about everybody's family history to find somebody who used a muzzleloader to get through their life. I mean, it was a necessary tool. I don't remember. I was watching or reading. I've been going through a lot of our old magazine articles from the association, and I was reading that traditionally the gun was kind of the car of their day. So if you were more of a nobleman, you had a nicer rifle, and if you were a farmer, you had a daily driver. It wasn't necessarily pretty, but boy, it got the job done.
Right, kind of like
And
your
just a
pickup.
couple skips back, and you're connected to that.
Yeah, and you could see that in the rifles, right? I mean, if you go back and
Oh yeah,
look, you could see that in some of the rifles, and you could see that it's kind of like people's pickups nowadays. You
yes,
get,
exactly.
yeah, you get guys that lift their pickups and they got all the bells and whistles, and then you got guys like me that can't afford to do that, so we just run around in what we got.
Yeah, and that's what's really neat to me. For me, my grandfather actually shot at and won the first NMLRA youth match
Oh, that's
in
cool.
1938.
Oh yeah,
And so I grew up knowing him, having been there at an early age of this association shooting.
right
But
on.
then just taking a couple skips back, it gets even closer to that. My other grandfather had hunted his entire life with a Civil War musket, just a military issue.
With the actual Civil War musket.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah, an original, just a beater. We've got it in the safe now. It's
Oh,
something I'll never let go.
right. Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
It's all he hunted with his entire life.
Someday I'm gonna have to meet you and see that.
Well, I'd be happy to show you. Something even neater, that same grandfather has an unfired Civil War musket.
No way. Wow.
So it came out of a factory after or at the end of the war there and never got in anybody's hand. They found it years later in like a warehouse or something, and it got out into the auction system. And I mean, it's just pristine.
Right
It's
on.
crazy.
That's cool. That is cool. And so, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 26.
Awesome. See, that's
So
what.
I'm super young when it comes to all of this. A lot
Right.
of my friends are at least 50 years older than me.
Now, are you a
To give you an
competition
idea of the
shooter
age of
yourself? Do you
muzzleloader.
shoot competition muzzleloader?
I do. I grew up shooting competition muzzleloader. My parents met at the NMLRA national matches.
Ah,
My father and his family were competitive pistol shooters, and my mother and her family were competitive bench rest and like cross sticks buffalo shooters.
oh wow.
So I grew up shooting both of those about until college, which was just a few years ago, really.
Right. Right.
And I kind of got out of it, and now I'm getting back into it.
Well, so being the spokesman, man. That is you're kind of that's cool that you're at the age that you are, because you know how to get a hold of the people that are looking into this stuff. Traditional bow hunting has a resurgent of younger people coming into it as well.
Absolutely.
And then so you're able to put the media out there and all that, but yet you have a deep experience. I mean, you got more experience in muzzle loading than a ton of people. Well, than me for sure. And I'm close to 50 now. So it's cool to see that there's somebody that's in that world speaking. And yeah, we need to kind of get that word out, because I think there's a lot of guys your age to my age, right, that really
Absolutely.
would love to get into muzzle loading. I mean, it just goes along with the traditional bow hunting. It's the same kind of thing. I was just telling my wife today, because of all the crud that we're going through with the virus and things like that, that if we just got powder and lead, I would be feeling pretty good and self-sufficient about being able to feed my family with just powder and lead. I don't have to have a reloader or anything like that. Just powder and lead.
And I'll even take one step away and make it even easier for you. if you have a smoothbore muzzleloader that's a flintlock, you're good to go as long as you've got some gravel nearby.
Oh, yeah. That even takes it even further. I didn't even think that route. I better get a
Yep.
smoothbore. That's what it sounds like.
You've got to get a smoothbore, and then you can start getting into some nice revolvers or pistols. But if you have a nice rifle and a nice smoothbore, you're good to go.
Oh yeah, yeah. Even gravel. I didn't even think about that because boy, you could do a number on squirrels,
Oh
and
yeah,
man, I'll eat squirrel all day long, and especially if I'm hungry, right?
oh yeah. That's kind of one of the old campfire stories I remember hanging out at the shoots was, when you get a group of people together, you start talking, and it gets about midnight, and you start talking about the end of the world or whatever.
Right, right.
And the one guy always talked about that, is if he goes a long distance away from home, he always has a flintlock smoothbore in his car because he always figures he has ammunition.
Oh, that's awesome. So anywhere you go, I mean, you could use seeds, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So with your smoothbores, okay, forgive my ignorance here. This is going to sound really bad, but with the smoothbore, do they make those in a pistol?
Oh yeah.
Oh, see,
Better Solely is actually coming out with their flintlock Howdah pistol, which I think it's out now. Probably we saw it at the SHOT Show, but it's a double barrel smoothbore flintlock pistol.
oh, gotta have it.
You should really look one up. We've got a short video about it on our YouTube. You should check out from the SHOT Show because it was just neat.
Oh, right on.
They have it in percussion, I believe, and then they have it in a modern. I believe it's a double 410. I think, but I'm not certain on that.
Right.
And then they're just coming out with the flintlock version of it this year. It is sweet.
Wow. Wow, yeah, that would be something that would be. It's not only something cool, but it has very practical use. Could you imagine just knowing that I have that in the back and then have some powder? Man, I'm good.
You feel invincible.
Well, I feel like I could at least feed myself. Yeah, I feel that way with my trad stuff too, my trad bows and things like that. But at the same time, this is just another one of those tools that you could put into what you do as a bushman, as a dare I say new frontiersman or mountain man or something like that. But pretty cool stuff, man. I just really enjoy that.
That's good. That's what we like to hear. I think a lot of what we see as an association is there's a lot of people out there, like you said, between my age and your age, and going to work every day and answering work emails on the phone and getting texts and calls all the time is really draining.
Yeah.
But when you can go out in the woods with your longbow or your muzzleloader, or even with just a pack and just go in and sit in the woods for a couple hours, that's a kind of peace that you cannot pay for or get any way else.
Right. Right.
And that's what I'm big on, is trying to support that. Is I don't care if you're not into muzzleloading or into especially the competition side of things. I mean, that's when you're into competitive muzzleloading, you're kind of a special breed in compared to and a lot of other things. It's a super niche hobby to get into. But if you want to get out and get outside and just go sit in the woods for a couple hours, like, that's what everybody needs to do, I think.
Yeah.
At a base level, you all need to go sit in the woods for a while.
Yeah, and there's really, and even beyond, I do that as well. I live out in the woods, so it's pretty easy for me. I just walk out my back door, and I got miles of woods. But hunting also is like another extension of that in our world, because when you start providing for yourself and you see where your food comes from, that also is pulling you away from that world of everything around you that's pulling at you. It actually makes you start to understand that how thankful you could be that that you can get a hamburger, and how thankful you could be in these things. And that's one of the big reasons. It's one of the main reasons I hunt, is to understand where my food comes from, and I want my kids and people around me to understand where our food comes from, and at the same time be that connected to nature, or connected to something that is not my phone. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
but that's one of the big reasons. And then I took up traditional bow hunting when I was a kid, when I was about 16 years old, and
Nice.
it did that. My friends and I built tree stands and shot jackrabbits out of tree stands behind our house, and jackrabbit's probably not the best eating rabbit, but if we're gonna shoot them, we ate them. So we did eat a lot of tough jackrabbit legs all over the barbecue, but at the same time there was an attachment there that this stuff brings. I mean, just shooting a muzzleloader brings you to that attachment. It's like my son came up and shot with me the other day, and he was saying, "Man, Dad, you're more of a part of this thing, or it's a part of you or something, because the minute you shoot it, then you start getting black on your hand from the blowback and then you got to go clean it out, and this stuff it's not just like put a cartridge in and go for it, which I don't mind either, but
oh no, not at all.
But it's just there's, I don't know, something a little bit more organic about pouring powder down a barrel, and so we've been doing a lot of that, and I'm actually going to hunt spring bear with it this year. That was one of the big things. Yeah, I'm going to hunt spring bears. We have a spring bear tag here in Oregon, and we have actually a overpopulation of bears. So I feel like, and last year I hunted with my traditional bow. If you ever want to go check it out, it's on our YouTube channel. But we got that.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, we got that bear within 50 yards, but that's outside of the range of a traditional bow. Yeah, it's quite a little ways.
That's outside my range for wanting to get close to a bear.
What's that?
That's outside of my range of wanting to get close to a bear.
I get close to them a lot around here. But the thing is there's so many of them, and I sit and I've griped on podcast even about how many bears there are in Oregon and what they're doing to our population and this and that. And then ODFW gives you an opportunity to shoot 3 a year because they're trying to manage that, right? And here I am with my traditional bow, and I had opportunity on 3 bears last year, and I couldn't get it done because I couldn't get quite close enough to release an arrow ethically for me. Some people can shoot it like that, but for me, I have to get closer. And so I thought, well, man, it started getting the juices flowing. I could still have that one shot. So I have that challenge of that one shot, but I can extend my range a little bit. And the muzzleloader started coming into mind. And so when I started this, that was what I was going after. And I just found out so much more. I mean, I've just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's really exciting. I love hearing about people getting into muzzleloaders. I think everybody comes in at a different avenue, I guess is the only way to describe it. Everybody takes a different road in. Yeah.
Yeah. So that moved me over, and then I went to, I think it was your web or your guys' YouTube channel, and then I looked at some of the subscriptions that you guys have, and I found Townsend on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
So that moved me into looking at following some of their stuff as far as, like the long hunters and those kind of things with the muzzleloaders. And they call them long hunters because of the long guns is pretty much what I gather.
Well, it's actually also tied into the length of time at which they would go out hunting.
Oh.
So traditionally, it was called a long hunt. And they would be out for a year or two at a time.
Okay, see, I was wrong there too, but but what that's done is now I'm looking at the living history that channel brings, and so this is what muzzleloading has done for me is brought me into, and I'm just scratching the surface. Well, like with long hunter, that scratched the surface. I thought, well, they're using those old long rifles, so that must be why they're being called that. But right on.
It's really exciting. We talked to Daniel Howell of the Folkcraft Revival podcast a couple episodes now. And it was interesting talking to him because for me in Indiana, the long hunters are very much a part of our history. And in talking with him, it kind of shook it into me that as you go farther west, and it's something I never really thought about before, but the long hunters kind of disappear as we start settling the west. I mean, you're into the fur trappers and the fur traders then, and kind of the rendezvous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
of the late 1800s, and I didn't realize how much that had changed.
yeah. That was the one thing is I was hoping that there was out there something that hit the 19th century like what they did with the 18th century with Townsend, right? They're hitting
Right.
right around the end of the 18th century, and because coming out here, Jedediah Smith and Kit Carson and those guys are people that we talk about a lot. And where I grew up around the Klamath tribe and the Modocs and the Modoc War, which was quite a bit later than muzzleloaders, but it
Yeah.
led up to that. And so all that history, that living, I was hoping that there was a living history channel in the 19th century. I think that would be very interesting to see.
Mm. It would be. I don't know of any off the top of my mind.
Yeah, yeah, and that's when the Hanken rifle came into the world was that 1840-ish. I mean, the
Exactly.
Hanken rifle that
Once
we
you
have
get into
now,
the
the half
percussion
stock,
era
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They did. They did a couple of full stock flint guns. The Hawkins family did, but they were super early, and it wasn't at all the impact of their half stock percussion rifles were.
yeah, yeah, and that, I mean, the half cock or the half stock, excuse me, the half stock percussion rifle, is kind of what everybody thinks about now when they think muzzleloader, at least on this end of the world.
Definitely.
and and the funny thing is there were so many more things leading up to that I had no clue. I had no clue until I started getting into this.
There's so much early human tinkering with it. I mean, I think a lot of people think Civil War in regards to muzzleloaders,
Right?
and that's something that kind of frustrates me. Is earlier America, I think, is much more interesting because you have the weirdness of the flintlocks, and then you're that much closer then to the wheel locks and the matchlocks of early Europe.
Right.
But then when you get into the Civil War, that's when you hit that industrial era, so you don't have the county-specific differences of the different kinds of rifles that came out of the eastern U.S.
Right.
And so everything changes once we cross the Mississippi there, and I think it's super interesting. But it's a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah. And to follow that, it has been, for me, it's kind of really eye opening. That's why I really enjoy what you guys do, is because you have all this there. All the content that you guys are putting out and all of the stuff that's on your website is really eye opening to me.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that it's working because a lot of the people that I'm working with and talking to about this stuff have been involved with it for 50 years or more.
Right.
And so and even myself, I'm personally biased because I grew up with it.
Right.
So I'm not sure sometimes how close I'm getting to things that are accessible to somebody who doesn't understand anything about it. So I appreciate hearing that. I don't want you to feel like you need to stroke my ego on it, but it is exciting to hear that it's getting out there and it's getting to the people that need it, and it's opening up doors.
No.
Much of this community, I think, for a long time has felt really closed off because it's taken us a while to embrace the internet. And
Yeah.
Townsend is really a leading force in that. I mean, they just grossed 1 million subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah.
And 1 million people out there aren't necessarily dressing up in their kit and going out and camping that
Right.
weekend, but they're making it accessible for people that just want to see somebody cook something, and
Right.
they're dressed funny while they're doing it.
Right. And doing it like the old school ways, and going back to maybe some of the simpler things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that in traditional bow hunting as well. We started putting out a podcast. It was when podcasts first started coming out in the traditional bow hunting world. There were a couple already out, and then we kind of got lazy with it. We kind of got lax on it. And coming forward now, there's a lot of people that were kind of like, I don't know about that kind of stuff. But now that's moved traditional bow hunting. It's helped out a lot in traditional bow hunting, and then of course you got organizations like PBS that get behind it, and then you have Compton's now that's behind it. They're behind all this stuff, and Traditional Bow Hunter magazine that is behind. So this is, and they're all for one purpose, is to get this stuff out there in front of people because it's important. We can't lose it, you know.
Yeah.
And I see you guys doing that too. And I think I think you're on that edge there, you know, when you first started, where people are going to start coming and looking at this and going, wow, there's a lot going on here that I never knew anything about.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. I've grown up in it, and I've said that before here, but there's a lot of information here just in our magazine. We've been publishing a monthly magazine for the better part each month since the late 1930s, 1938, 1939. So there's just stacks of information that even contemporary members haven't read or even heard of. And because we have those and have them digitized now, I'm able to go back through and share that stuff and say, hey, you know, I just found an article on, it was just 6 simple ways to tune up your flintlock.
Awesome.
And to me, it just caught my eye. It's like, you know, that sounds like a modern article headline.
Yeah.
It's kind of catchy, 6 simple steps, but it was written in the 80s.
That's awesome.
And I read through it, and the mechanics of it are all the same thing that you can use today.
Right. Yeah, cool.
So it makes my job easy because I love what I'm doing, and there's decades of information that nobody's seen.
Right. And you got the content there. You just got to get it out.
Yeah.
So where do you get all the pictures? That's what I got to ask, because man, there is some cool stuff that you put on your Instagram.
So part of that is I'm going out to events and filming and photographing as much as I can. Now, with the COVID-19 thing, it's really put a damper on that process.
Yeah.
So a couple weeks ago, I was out at the 2020 Horn Fair with the Honorable Company of Horners. And that was just 2 days of powder horns, powder flasks, and horn goods, for lack of a better, and accoutrements. And so in a non-virus outbreak situation, I'm going out a couple times a month to a big show with hundreds of tables of people's work that are displaying their craft. That's their way of continuing this tradition.
Right.
And then the other part of it is we have a pretty large Facebook group where I'm always working on encouraging people to share photos of what they're doing. And our membership is very dedicated to seeing all of this continue forward. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit. And while we host these large national matches, the core of what we do is education, be that traditional craft, muzzle loading, traditional archery, or the living history side of things, and pushing that forward. So our membership will do just about anything that they can do to help push this forward.
Right on.
And so I can't, about probably half the Instagram posts and things that I'm putting out, in the videos especially, I couldn't do those without their support of what I'm doing. We posted a couple of videos this week with a couple of different muzzleloader builders that come to our national events and set up and display their work. And they know things that I will never know about building a muzzleloader. I've got some stuff in the shop right now that I'm going to be putting some things together on a couple videos just because people want to see muzzleloaders being put together. And I have the equipment and things to do it.
Right.
So I'm going to be moving forward with that initiative. But watching me build something, you know, as a novice, as a very young person in this, pales in comparison to these guys that have been building muzzleloaders for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
And I could not share that without their support and their dedication to seeing this move forward.
Yeah. I put that kit together, and then I thought, oh, this is cool. I'm going to show people how to put a kit together, which I did, and it turned out really well.
Yeah.
It's cool. But at the
it
same
was great.
But at the same time, when I started researching, I'm like, oh my goodness. There's guys out there building their own barrels.
Yeah.
And just the craftsmanship. I mean, mine turned out really nice, and I love it, and it's great. And I think that's a great way to get into it. Go get a kit, build one.
Absolutely. Everybody, I think, that's interested in muzzleloading should invest in a kit
Yeah.
or the parts to build their own.
Yep. Yep. Because there's something you, especially, you could say, well, I built this. And another thing is, it now. You know a lot of parts of that rifle and or gun, and it just the thing is. But when I was doing the research and thinking, wow, I'm a really good craftsman here, and then I start doing the research, and I just was blown away. My goodness, there are some craftsmen out there.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother area of muzzle loading.
Oh, just the powder horns, like you said, I never realized.
Yeah.
How amazing some of these guys are. And then so one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on the podcast, and one of the reasons I want to do this on a traditional bow hunting podcast, is because a lot of that goes, Boyers hand down a lot of their craft to apprentices, and we ooh and ah over bows because it's really cool. Muzzleloading the same way, and I wanted to, kind of get that out there that, hey, look, guys, there is a bunch of craftsmanship and people that just dedicated as you are with your bows. You got to check this out. It's cool.
Yeah. I think it's a very natural extension, and it weirdly kind of works with human history.
Yeah.
I made my own longbow at the age of 12 and carved it out.
Yeah.
It's made out of hickory, and I still have it and still shoot it today.
Nice.
But you kind of, for me personally, it was fun starting with a longbow, and then as I got older and things got a little more complicated, I started to step into the muzzleloading.
Right.
And muzzleloading building. So my first muzzleloader that I put together was an old CBA Derringer kit.
Oh yeah.
With a little gambling gun.
Uh-huh.
It was dirt simple to put together, but like you say, at the end of it, it's that extension of the intimacy of the traditional sportsman community, I guess.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. So where can they find out all this stuff? I usually try to keep these around 30 minutes, so we're over that quite a little bit. But yeah, I could talk about this stuff all day. I got to put a time limit on myself, or else we'll be here for hours.
I understand.
But so where can they find you guys' stuff and what you're doing? I know you got a lot of avenues.
Yeah. Well, the kind of hub for everything is the National Muzzleloading Rifle Association, and that's a big mouthful. So we usually go by NMLRA. Excuse me. And our website is nmlra.org. And there you can find our podcast, our video, our social media. On Facebook, we're NMLRA. On Instagram, we go by the name of our magazine, Muzzle Blast. And that should, if I'm doing my job, that should get you interested and kind of get you in our system.
Yeah, it's got me completely interested. Although I haven't sent my money in to be a member yet, but I'm going to. I just haven't got around to it. I live up in the woods, so sometimes getting a check in the mail is a little bit harder. But
hey, that's okay.
But that's
I'm not,
something I'm going to do.
Well, I appreciate that. A lot of what we do, is dependent on the membership, but a lot of what I'm trying to do in getting things out there is to show everybody that this stuff is out there. Whether you become a member or not, I want you to be interested, and everybody at the association wants you to be interested in this, to go out and do it, get your hands dirty, and have some fun.
Yeah. And it shows in the stuff that you're putting out. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, man. We're going to have to do this again. Okay.
Hey, I'd love to. This is great.
Yeah. We'll get you back on here and maybe go into some specific rifles or things like that have some history behind them and talk on those terms. But I just wanted to get people introduced to what's going on over at the muzzle loading side of the world. And, some of the bow hunters, some of the traditional guys aren't going to listen to this podcast. So they're going to just go, no. And that's good if they, no problem in that. But I know so many traditional guys that are going to be, maybe I should start looking a little bit more into the muzzle loading world. And it's going to be something for them. So that's why I got you on. I sure appreciate it. Any last things you'd like to say?
I think just kind of the standard in the muzzleloading world is just keep your powder dry.
There you go. All right. Thanks a bunch. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Please, if you guys like this content, go ahead and rate us on iTunes. And, go over, check those guys out at Muzzle Blast, their podcast, and check out the website. And then also check out their Instagram. All right. Until then. Thanks for joining us on another edition of Barebow Hunters Podcast. Hey, if you like what you heard, please give us a rating down below. We like the 5 stars. And follow us also on Instagram under Barebow Hunters. Go to our YouTube account, Barebow Hunter at YouTube, under the Life Outdoors heading. So that's Barebow Hunters YouTube under the Life Outdoors. Also, go in, join Barebow Hunter group on Facebook. Thanks again for listening.